Now we're going back to the beginning of Parashas Tazria, and even though most of the portion overwhelmingly deals with the issue of tsaras, even though most of the portion deals with the issue of tsaras, nevertheless, the beginning of this portion deals with a totally different topic, and that is a woman after she gave birth, a woman who gives birth. Somebody who asked Elaine this week said he'll do one of the portions, whichever one is a bigger segula for him because his wife is pregnant. Well, I said you should do Parashas Tazria because Parashas Tazria is about a woman who conceives and then gives birth. And so that's the opening part of the parasha is about a woman who conceives. I'll say it outside what's going on so everybody is clear on it. And then we will look at it inside. So the basic law is that a woman who bleeds, uterine blood is either biblically a nida or a zava. Today we call everything a nida. So basically, if a woman bleeds, she's going to be ritually impure, prohibited to be with her husband for a minimum 12 days today. The first 7 days for the week of the bleeding, and then she has to wait a minimum. She has to wait a minimum of 7 clean days altogether. It comes out to basically like 12 days. But basically 7 days after she finishes her bleeding. But there's another aspect. So that's called a nida. That's what we call colloquially today a nida. But nevertheless, in biblical times, there was another aspect here that was called dam leda, the blood of giving birth. And that's what our portion begins with, that if a woman gives birth, or when a woman gives birth, the first 7 days for a boy and the first 14 days for a girl, she's going to be considered to be ritually impure. That's called dam leda. That blood she's considered ritually impure. Then for the next 33 days and next 66 days, even if she's bleeding, she's gone to the mikvah after 7 days for a boy and after 14 days for a girl. And the next 33 days for a boy and 66 days for a girl, even though she's bleeding, that blood is called dam tahor. Dam tohar. It's pure blood, meaning to say she's not ritually impure, but she is what's called mechusar kippurim. She's lacking atonement, meaning to say she's still not allowed to enter into the Beis HaMikdash courtyard. She's still not allowed to eat from the sacred food until she brings 2 offerings, an ola offering, which is an entirely burnt offering, and a chatas, and a sin offering. And so until she does that, she's going to be considered mechusar kippurim, lacking complete atonement. The ola offering is at first glance a sheep, and the sin offering is at first glance a bird. But the Torah also here introduces the concept. There's another concept here called karban ola v'yored. You heard of what's the income tax where it reflects your salary? Well, I forgot what that's called, but basically where the income tax reflects your salary, the rich pay more taxes, the rich pay a higher percentage of taxes than the poor. So too, if a woman cannot afford to pay the full to bring a sheep, she can bring 2 birds. If she's poor, she can, instead of bringing the offering of the sheep, she can bring the karban ola v'yored. She can bring the lesser amount. So let us now go to the verses, and we'll look at it with the some of the powerful commentaries that I saw that I selected to share with you. Hold on, let me open that up. Okay. So okay, here we go. Okay, so let's go to the text as it states as follows. So God spoke to Moses, speak to the children of Israel. Isha ki Tazria, the woman will conceive the Yolda Zachar, and she'll give birth to a male. Vitama Shivas Yamim. she will be tamei for 7 days. Kimei nidas divosa, as the days of a nida woman's flow, for that she will be tamei. Rashi had offered two explanations of what a divosa is: either infirmity or else flow. So this is the law of a woman who conceives and gives birth to a male. So I just want to point out, some wanted to comment on this basis because it says Isha ki Tazria. We know that there's a concept that a bris, it overrides the Shabbos. And if the 8th day of the circumcision comes on Shabbos, then we override the Shabbos, and mole is allowed to do the act, not every act related to circumcision, but the essential acts related to circumcision. But someone pointed out that's only in a case where the woman conceives in the natural or typical manner. But if the conception is not done in the natural, typical manner, but it's done through IVF, then we're going to say that it doesn't override the Shabbos, because it says Isha ki Tazria, when she conceives. But if it was implanted, then it's not done in a similar manner, and so therefore it doesn't override the Shabbos. I want to just point out, as we discussed, that one of the great mysteries is, why is it a boy she's tamei for 7 days and a girl she's tamei for 14 days? That's one of the great mysteries here. Another great mystery here is, why is she bringing a sin offering? What sin did she do? These are two of the most classic questions about this topic. I can share with you what the Gemara Nida says about the boy. Not everybody might like it, but I'll share with you anyway. So the Gemara in Nida on Lamed Aleph and Beis said that the students asked Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. You have to remember, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, he had to run away to the cave. Why? Because he was worried his wife was going to spill the beans about where he was hiding. It says in the Gemara in Shabbos 33b that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, after somebody informed on him to the Romans, he ran to the base medrash and he was hiding there. But then he said he's worried his wife was going to reveal it to the Romans, so he ran to the cave. So they asked Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, why did they say Torah was Zachar Tamei Shivas Yamim in a cave Arba'asar? Why did the Torah say that a male is tamei for, that if she gives birth to a male, she's tamei for 7, and for a female for 14 days? Amar lahem. So he said to them, B'shah sha'isha koras le'leid nishba'a shelo tizakek l'ba'ala. Because when the moment when a woman is going through the birth pangs of childbirth, she takes an oath that she's never going to be with her husband again. I mean, I don't know if that's actually accurate. I don't know if any woman has ever said that oath, but we have to bear in mind that childbirth was a lot more dangerous before anesthesia than it is today. So I'm not going to criticize, but I don't know that there is empirical evidence to support that. And so when she gives birth to a male and everybody's happy, she regrets right away after 7 days. And so right away after 7 days, she wants to, hold on one second, we finish this quotation from the Talmud. Right away after 7 days, she expresses her regret. And when she gives birth to a female, people are a little bit less happy. There was a lot more responsibility with respect to a girl. So therefore, she has the regret for 14 days. This is what Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai says. It's always a provocative statement, but let me hear. Thank you, April, for that comment. Appreciate it. You obviously have been in many births, so you know what women say under those circumstances. The Marsha explains that since the woman is cursing as a result of the pain of the childbirth, therefore, when there's more pain when she gives birth to a girl, some level. Not exactly sure what that means, but the Torah Tamima gives another explanation. He says, I don't know that this is true either. He says that it says in the Gemara in Baba Basra that when a male is born into the world, peace comes to the world. And when a female is born, strife comes into the world. Not every, I don't know. And also, the Baal Turim says that the male is the gematria. It relates to um, uh, bracha of blessing. So I don't know if these are accurate, but I think it's referring to maybe grasping at straws to try and figure this out. But it's definitely a challenge. So if people want to reflect on it, that's what the Talmud says, and we have our work cut out for us in this area. The it says in the next verse, I'll go back to this in a moment, but it says Uvayom Hashmini Yimol Basar also, and then in response to this, on the eighth day, there shall be a circumcision. So let me just share some of the comments on this that I found the most powerful. Ishaki Tazria, a woman will give birth, and she'll give birth to a male, and she'll be tameh for 7 days. So the Kotzker Rebbe says, we learned this at the end of the Gemara in Sanhedrin, that there are 3 keys to the world. There are 3 keys to the world. Hold on, when our friend Sasan Simcha has a point to make. Yeah, back to the point we were discussing. Isha ki tazria v'yalda zachar. So we learned at the end of the Gemara Sanhedrin that there are 3 keys. There are 3 keys that God gave to the world. And one is the key of childbirth, because Eliyahu Navi had the key for rain, and he also wanted the key for childbirth. And God said there are 3 keys that were handed over. Everything else that was handed over to a messenger or an agent, but not the key for birth. So how is it possible that they asked the Kotzker Rebbe, if it's coming straight from God, how is it possible that there could be tumah associated with birth? It's the holiest thing in the world is birth. How could there be ritual purity associated with it? So he makes the point, no, the God's there, there's no tumah. But the departure of God, it's after the birth that the tumah comes. And that's the same idea with respect to a death. Why is the death why is the dead body tameh? Because while the body is alive, the soul is there, and God's presence is there. But once the body has departed from the world, then once the neshama, which is the divine aspect of our existence, has departed, then therefore it says the divine presence has departed, and then the power of tumah can settle there, and that's the concept. Okay, so now I want to focus on the next verse, which is on the 8th day, Yom HaShmini, on the 8th day, Yimol Basar also. On the 8th day, the circumcision shall take effect. Now, there's a lot of discussion about these words of Yom HaShmini, on the 8th day, he shall circumcise. I want to just share a little bit of these teachings, so we understand the full scope of the Talmud's discussion of this topic. So first of all, since it says Uvayom Hashmini, on the 8th day, so from here the Gemara in Shabbos 132a says on the 8th day, even on Shabbos, because it could have just said Uvashmini Yimol. So from the fact that it says specifically on the 8th day, we see from here that even on Shabbos. Now, when we say that the circumcision overrides Shabbos, that means the main aspect of the circumcision, but not the preparations. Like, for example, in a city where there's no Eruv, you cannot bring the knife. You can't carry the knife there through the public domain. And so since basically anything that was possible to do on the eve of Shabbos, you can't prepare, you can't do it on Shabbos itself for the bris. There's a whole question in the Gemara, what about if the water spilled, if the hot water spilled, which they used to give to the baby afterwards, are you allowed to give, or they used to use to heal, are you allowed to do the bris knowing that you're going to have to boil the water after? So that's a dispute in the Talmud. That's the first thing. The second teaching comes from the Gemara in Shabbos 135a, where it states, Kol she'imo tmei aleda nimo lishmona. Anytime where a woman she will give birth, she will become tamei. Then the baby is circumcised on the eighth day. But if the woman is not tamei oleda, then she's not going to be circumcised on the eighth day. And what's an example? That's what the Gemara in Shabbos 135a says. This goes back to our point. The Torah Tamima says specifically here that this refers to a C-section. Since she's not tumas leda, since she doesn't have the blood, the uterine blood, even though she has it, but nevertheless, since it's done via C-section, therefore she's not biblically speaking tamei for 7 days, and so therefore the bris does not take place on the eighth day. Another example that the Talmud gives about this is, let's say a woman gives birth, and then the next day she converts. She converts to Judaism. So does that bris take place on the eighth day if the eighth day is Shabbos? No, it wouldn't take place on the eighth day. But that could be done right away. And also that woman is not tamei for 8 days because it has to be this specific criteria. And then it says Vayom Hashmini on the eighth day. So when are you supposed to do the circumcision? First of all, we know only during the day and not at night. You have to wait until sunrise. Are you supposed to do the bris in the morning, like the first thing in the morning? Is that the best time to do it, or can you do it in the afternoon as long as it's before nighttime? So the Gemara in Pesachim Daf Daled says Kol Hayom Kasher Amol. The whole day is okay for circumcision. On the eighth day you should circumcise, but Zrizim Makdimin mitzvahs. Really, the whole day is kosher, but we want to wake up early and do it as early as possible because the quicker you get to do the mitzvah, the better you do. So therefore, you want to do it as early as possible, just because of this concept of its reason. But for example, if you have reasons to push off, like for example, you have the better moel is later in the day. You want a better moel could come later in the day. Well, that's a good reason to wait. Or let's say the grandparents can only get there later in the day. That's also a good reason to wait. So these are some reasons to wait. What about, let's say the bris is not done on the eighth day for whatever reason, it's pushed off to the ninth or moving onward. Does it also need to be done during the day, or can you then do it at night? So about this, the Gemara in Yevamos says, I only know the eighth day. How do I know if the baby's being circumcised on the ninth day or the 10th day or the 11th day? How do I know? Because it says uvayom, extra vav, means to say that no matter when the bris takes place, it can only be done during the day. It can never be done at night. Let's say you have a person, this happens, that the genitalia are covered up at birth, and you have to do like a surgical procedure to uncover the baby's genitalia in order to be able to do the bris. So then he would not be circumcised. It does not override the Shabbos because it says v'yolda zachar. He has to be a male, an obvious male at birth, from the moment of birth in order to give him the bris on the eighth day. Then we'll just do one or two more, and then we'll go to the basic question, why on the eighth day? But this will develop it based upon this Gemara. In Nida 31b, the Gemara says, Shalu Talmidim es Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. The students asked Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, Ma Amra Torah. So this is a very complicated source. Why did the Torah say Milo Lishmona? Why did the Torah say circumcision should be on the eighth day? Meaning to say, as opposed to the seventh day. That's what Rashi says. Why does it say specifically on the eighth day as opposed to the seventh day? So he gives the answer. Why is the bris on the eighth day? Although let me pause for a moment and see if anybody has an answer to that. I want to just pause and see what people want to say to this. Okay, so the question is, why the students asked Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, why did the Torah say that circumcision is on the eighth day? So he said to them, we don't want everybody else to be happy, whereas the mother and the father are sad. Why are the mother and the father sad? Because the woman and the husband cannot be living together because she's tumas leda, because the first 7 days she's tuma. Nowadays we say she's tuma for 3 months, basically for the whole time. Anytime she's bleeding, and usually, typically speaking, women bleed for several months after they give birth. So if that's the case, we don't want the mother and the father to be sad. So after a week where they're allowed to be together again, that's when we do the bris. So what? Well, that's not really relevant anymore, because nowadays the husband and the wife, they are not able to be together for several months, so they would always be sad. So why do we do the bris on the 8th day specifically? So we have the Torah Tamima says, the Vilna Gaon already taught that any takana, any reform or repair that was instituted for a specific reason, even though that reason was nullified, we still are going to keep the takana. Like over here, the bris, according to Rabbi Shimon Rechai, was on the 8th day, so that the husband and the wife would be allowed to live together again. But nowadays, we know that that's not accurate, and so that nevertheless, it's we still keep the takana. So the Rambam gives the same answer that April gives. Are you trying to say something?
That the baby can experience Shabbos.
Yeah, so we'll get to that answer. That's what Bruce said, Baruch Hashem. We'll get to that answer in a moment. Before we get to that, Bishkoyach on that answer, exactly right. Bruce and my father gave the same answer. But before we get to, let me just go back and say, before we get to the answer that Bruce gave and my father gave, I want to just cite that the Rambam Maimonides, who was a doctor, he agrees with April's answer. He says, what's the reason? He writes in the Moreh Nevuchim, chapter 49, he says that what's the reason why the circumcision takes place on the 8th day is so that the baby can be stronger. And so everybody questions the Rambam. Why does the Rambam delete the explanation of the Gemara and give his own logic? So the Torah Tamima says, I actually found the source to support the Rambam, and that is the Midrash Rabbah. He says, why is the baby circumcised on the 8th day? Because God has mercy upon him so that he should be a little stronger. You have to get that right moment where he's strong enough to be able to withstand it, but not too weak, but not too strong, that he's going to notice what you're doing to him. And so that's the fine line. Now we go back to the other explanation: is why is the bris on the 8th day? And we heard a couple of explanations saying the following: that Gedola, this is from the Yalkut Yehuda, Gedola Shabbos, it quotes the Mechilta, the Midrash to Exodus chapter 31. Shabbos is so great that you can't circumcise the child until he celebrates at least one Shabbos. Theoretically, you could have said the opposite, that you have to circumcise the child before Shabbos, so that he doesn't go into Shabbos without a bris. But we say the opposite, that it's in order to make sure that he observes the Shabbos before he has the bris. So what's the reason? Because through the Shabbos, he becomes sanctified. And then he's able to come into the Kedusha, the holiness of the Jewish people, with the circumcision. Without the Shabbos, he wouldn't be sanctified. So the baby is not violating the Shabbos, no way, right? That's one thing that baby is for sure not doing. There's no way the baby can violate Shabbos, impossible. And so therefore we do that. Another explanation, this one is a little bit, comes from Rabbeinu Bechaye. He says that the reason is because the mitzvah of circumcision is almost like a sacrificial offering, meaning to say we're taking blood, we cut off something. It's a little bit like a sacrifice. And so, in fact, the Psalms chapter 50, verse 5 says, compares the circumcision to a sacrifice. And just like the blood of a sacrificial offering is thrown on the altar as an atonement, so too the blood of the circumcision is also serving as an atonement. And so just like a sacrifice, when an animal is born, it cannot be offered as an offering until the 8th day. So too, in this sense, the baby is just like the 8th day. So that's another explanation. Another explanation is from the Baal Turim, and he says that basically you want to go beyond the first week, because just like the way baby enters the world is the way the baby leaves the world, that there's a 7-day period. And so only after that are you able to move on to the next aspect. Okay, hold on one second. We have a question from April or Bruce. Yes. It's a custom at the circumcision to say, Kishem shenichnas labris, the same way you enter into the circumcision, so you shall enter, Ken Yikanes, La Torah, Chuppah, Momasim Tovim. So you shall enter into the Torah, Chuppah, and good deeds. So what's the connection between a bris and entering into Torah, Chuppah, and good deeds? Why do we say this specifically at a circumcision? Because from this mitzvah, just like the idea of a bris, especially there are many other cultures that circumcise. What the initial rabbinic practice brought was the priya that introduced was to make circumcision irreversible by also tearing down the membrane around the foreskin, which otherwise you could kind of hide the circumcision. But they made that irreversible. And so now we say that it's brought down that why do we say Ken Yikanas Torah Chuppah Masim Tovim? Because the bris is something that's an irreversible action. You can't, I mean, I guess maybe now you can do everything, like you can attach a foreskin, but you have to go through tremendous difficulty to do that. So just like this is a mitzvah that you can't separate from, also Torah and good deeds and chuppah should be something that all other mitzvahs you don't separate from. That these mitzvahs are lifelong mitzvahs, a lifelong pursuit. Another explanation, it comes from the Kutzkers, and they say that just like the baby is the center of attention at the bris. He's doing this mitzvah, but he has no arrogance associated with him at all, and no external thoughts. So too, when he gets his as he grows in life, he should be able to go into Torah and Chuppah and Masim Tovim without any arrogance or improper thoughts associated with it. There's also one more thing I'll say about this, is that there's a practice to do a meal at the circumcision, and the source for that is like the where we quoted, that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said everybody else is happy. We see from here that at a bris it was a strong custom of having a party, and so therefore for this reason, even though like all other parties you could turn down the invitation to, but if somebody invites you to a bris, you can't turn it down. That's why the custom is you don't actually invite somebody to bris, you just let people know, because the idea of a bris, having a party at a bris, was actually in the Gemara. That's what we just quoted, the Gemara from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in Nida 31b. Okay, I know we discussed a lot about a bris today, and God willing, we should have many opportunities to celebrate.